And the end, they are just of the ASEAN.
Welcome to the SDG International Conference 2024.
This conference is a testament to the power of collaboration and shared vision and value. We have an exciting program lined up. These 2 days featuring different insightful papers and also a welcoming cultural night tonight.
I am thrilled to see such a rich tapestry of international representation, a true reflection of global commitment to the SDGs.
We gather today under the banner of building inclusive communities through sustainable development goals, as well as social and solidarity economic initiatives.
The first person for this is Dr. Teo Su Lan, who is the Director of Research.
Is effectively translated into firm actions and concrete results at the local level to benefit communities.
In the ASEAN region, many things are very important. Inclusivity is defined in a very limited way, so we need to enhance that. Inclusive community economy, because an economy is embedded in the community. If you cannot find economy in the community, you are missing out. And I think definitely on the ASEAN 2025 is something we can take up vis-a-vis SDG-SSE.
The two keywords, I think, one, people-centric, centering of the people, and then number two is trying to enact social change.
First is networking. Let them get into the network. Let them find their identity. And then after they feel that, hey, they are comfortable, they find themselves in this community, develop them. They need some skill in order to perform.
This platform is to bring people together, and I could see a lot of synergy. People are excited, they're working together for one purpose, which is promoting or accelerating SDGs as well.
But after we showcase to them a few success stories, actually we're helping the Member of Parliament to help their people.
You feel rejuvenated and happy to see people of like-minded together. I hope and look forward to more, maybe other countries, other institutions can host more programs like this to bring like-minded people together. I think it's such an important platform
we can leverage the collective expertise and resources of the ASEAN region to accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs. So as we say our goodbyes, I leave you with this. Hold on to hope, the passion and the connections forged here. Let them guide you as you return to your communities, ready to turn ideas into reality. We are
Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our first SDG-SSE seminar of Spanish month. So today we have our speaker, Dr. Peter Ramadan, will be joining from Zoom, and then we also have our moderator, Dr. Mustafa Mohammed. And before we start the session, I would like to invite Zoran to deliver the
Hello, good morning. Alright, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, our honorable advisor, Dr. Sri Mustafa, Dr. Sri Michael, our friends online and also in person. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is actually a build-up event for 2025. As you know that Malaysia is hosting the ASEAN, chairing the ASEAN country in 2025, and we are preparing in May of 2025.
We cannot hear. The microphone is
Hello?
off. Okay.
Okay, and we are now is
the microphone for the Zoom.
the microphone for the Zoom. Hello, now it's okay.
Okay, now it's okay.
I'm so sorry. Allow me to introduce myself again. So my name is Joel, the director of my SDG Academy and also the corporate communication of APBGM SDG. So welcome everyone and thanks for joining this. It's supposed to be a webinar, but now it's become a hybrid. We have about 20 people in person here. So including our advisor, Dr. Sri Mustafa, and also Dr. Sri Michael from KSI here. So this is a build-up event for 2025. We are together with APBGM, my SDG Academy, and NZ. We are planning for an ASEAN SDG-SSE summit in the May. And in this time, we will have 4 tracks. A 2-day event with 4 tracks, which features the work of SDG, SSE, human rights, and we want to bring the power of youth in the picture as well. So we look it seriously and we are start planning of it. And thanks for joining today. I will say that this is just an inception. After that, we can have more discussion and also, regardless you are in person or online today, if you are interested to be a part of this big party and also summit, let's communicate. We have about 9 months to 12 months to go about. Alright, so I hope that everyone have a good dialogue and also sharing today, good session and networking session today. Thank you very much. Alright, so for next, I would like to introduce Dr. Ari. Dr. Ari, hi Dr. Ari, our co-host from AZ. Over to you.
Hello.
Over to you, Dr. Ari.
Okay, thank you very much, Zoel. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone in Malaysia or everywhere are with the Zoom that you access. So, my name is Eri from ASEAN Solidarity Economic Council. I would like to appreciate the APPNG SDGs Malaysia in collaborations with the ASEC as a hub of the SSE practitioners in Asia for organizing this webinar in preparations for the ASEAN SDG Summit in Malaysia next year. That will be held next year. So that actually today's meeting is a kind like a preparations or warming up for the next year's summit, APPNG, for the APPNG ASEC advocacy a strategy to promote social solidarity economy in SDG to ASEAN. So APPNG and ASEC has a long-term strategy to advocate ASEAN to promote the policy framework into the ASEAN. So today's webinar, which is registered by 158 participants, actually as a warming up for the next year's summit. And then this webinar actually consists of the 5 series, yeah. Starting with today with the theme of the key achievement and challenges, SDG in ASEAN with the key achievement and challenges. So, in this momentum, I would like as well to thank our resource person that we are facing during this webinar, Dr. Victor Kanuman. He is a former regional advisor on the participations and partnership at the UNICEF regional in Bangkok. As well to our moderators, Bapak Datuk Sri Mustafa. He is a former minister of the Malaysia and advisor to civil society in promoting NDG. So, ladies and gentlemen, might be social solidarity economy is not well known by many governments, as well many of you might be, yeah? But this form of economic actually exists in our country, in ASEAN. You are familiar with the form of cooperative, you are formed with foundations, associations, community self-help groups, and many other forms. So essentially, the social solidarity economy models is characterized by the collective ownerships with the democratic decisions-making process and priorities the profit put the priorities of the people above the profit in their activities as well in the business. So therefore, the value-based business model, which is of the SSE, will ensure the reducing of inequality. But actually, unfortunately, this beautiful model of economy has not yet been integrated into the policy framework in many countries in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, as well in the ASEAN policy framework itself. But if I observe that actually ASEAN is committed to accelerating the achievement of SDGs. In 2023, a joint statement has been signed in the ministerial dialogue on accelerating the SDGs. So that I see our strategy with this webinar is aligned with the ASEAN interest as well in promoting SDGs. But more than this, actually this is aligned with the global momentum that we have related to the SSE. At the first, we have the ILO conference in Geneva in 2022, as well the second global policy from the UN General Assembly that mentioning how the SSE will play an important role in accelerating the SDGs. So at this point, I see that the relevance of the APPNG SDGs Malaysia with the ASEC on the advocacy goal, try to realizing, breaking down, putting down, take it into the actions to make it happen, the UN and ILO global advocacy in the ASEAN regions. Last but not least, I would like to thank Zoel from APPNG, Malaysia, as well Chandra from the ASEC and all the team that I cannot mentioning the name one by one for organizing this webinar. I hope that this webinar could result a fruitful knowledge exchange among us and innovations to accelerate the SDGs. I wish you a happy and fruitful webinar. Thank you. Give it back to you, Zoel.
Alright. Thank you, Dr. Ari. And now I'll hand over to Dr. Sri Mustafa.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning. Welcome to the program on SDGs and ASEAN, progress, challenges, and moving forward. The title of this program this morning. Let me welcome everyone. as mentioned by Joel, we have about 25 participants in the room, in person, and 115 registered in Zoom. So altogether, we have about 180 people. Mostly come from Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and every ASEAN countries. Thank you so much for your support. My name is Dato' Pa. I've been working closely with Dr. Dennison and his team for many months. This is a tripartite venture, joint venture between three parties. Firstly, the all-party parliamentary group, SDGs Malaysia, led by Dr. Dennison, we have the SDG Academy as well, and of course we have Dr. Eri. So this is a tripartite partnership. We thank you, Dr. Eri, for your strong support. The objective, quite a few objectives. Firstly, of course, is to share best practices among ASEAN countries, what each one is doing to achieve SDGs. Secondly, to find out what each one of us is doing to accelerate the achievement of SDGs. Next, of course, is to see what we can do together as ASEAN member countries to accelerate SDG achievement. So those are some of the objectives. And as mentioned by Dr. Eri and Zol as well, this is in preparation for next year. As we all know, next year is Malaysian year. Last year was Indonesia was chair of ASEAN. This year is Laos, next year is our turn. I've been talking to Dr. Dennison and others. I think it's very important for us, for Malaysia to take initiative, bringing people together to share best practice next year. So this is in preparation for next year's Malaysia's turn to chair ASEAN. So thank you once again. We have two speakers, Dr. Victor Karunan, who's been with UNICEF for many years. He retired only in 2016, an expert on many matters. He's going to share with us what SDGs are all about and what the achievements are. Secondly, a paper from Mr. Jeremy Lim. He's an analyst with the Asia headquarters of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. He'll take about 10 minutes. So altogether, we have about 45 minutes of presentation, half an hour from Dr. Victor, and about 10 minutes from Jeremy. That's all from me. So once again, thank you everyone for your support. We look forward to hearing, firstly, views from our two speakers, and about 12:30, we will open this for Q&A from participants, both online and those of you present in this room. Okay, let me begin with the first presentation. Dr. Victor Karunan, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sri Mustafa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope the audio is okay.
Yes.
You can hear me good?
It's fine, thank you.
Yeah, so let me begin. I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Very good. Yeah. So this, I'm happy to first of all kick off this first SDG-SSE dialogue session. As Dr. Mustafa said, it's built up towards the main summit that's going to happen next year in Malaysia. But it's also timely, I think, to have this series because we only have about 6 years left towards the final goal of 2030. And it's important to keep taking stock and to see where we've done well and where we need to do more. So that's what my presentation is all about. I'm going to just give a quick overview on SDGs, what I think in my all my years of work with UNICEF and with other organizations that I see as important, and also to look at how the SDGs has been a step forward from the MDG, just to point out a few things that I think we need to keep in mind. Then I'm going to focus on a few critical areas. I've done a selection of issues and challenges that ASEAN faces as we move towards 2030. For me, one of the major concerns has been the principle of no one left behind. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But also planning and budgeting on SDGs, and then see what are the challenges that ASEAN faces moving forward. Localization has been very much on the agenda. There's been some very good progress, and it's important that we do more in the final push towards 2030 because at the end of the day, there has to be ownership for the SDGs. among communities, among families, among interest groups, among civil society, private sector, etc. And then final conclusion that I'll try to be brief in my presentation today. Just a few things that I think are important about the SDGs. Firstly, up to date, starting from the 1970s, when the UN started the development decades, the SDGs are perhaps the most comprehensive and holistic development agenda that we have. Nobody disputes that. Second, with the initiative of Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, starting with Kofi Annan earlier, SDGs were also seen as a most consultative process. A wide range of civil society, private sector, experts, academics, and others participate in the various expert groups that were set up for drafting the SDGs. So there's a tremendous amount of multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary input to the SDG formulation. Third, the stock taking on MDGs showed that there are many things that remained as unfinished business. There are many lessons from the MDGs in the past 15 years, and therefore the SDGs try to build on that and improve in addressing some of the gaps the SDGs we look at. And lastly, I think what is significant of the SDGs is that it is much more firmly integrated within national development agendas today than the MDGs were before. In all countries in ASEAN and across the world have tried to integrate the goals and targets of the SDGs in the national development plans. The SDGs are comprehensive in what is called the 5 Ps of sustainable development. As you see, this is a trajectory, sort of a framework that helps us to see the holistic nature of the SDGs. Focus on people, prosperity, peace, partnerships, and the planet. So this is a quick snapshot of how comprehensive the SDGs are. When we take a step back and look at the MDGs, something strikes out immediately. Firstly, the MDGs were formulated on specific, selected, predetermined issues that were on the top agenda for the international community. Poverty, hunger, primary education, etc. HIV/AIDS. Second, they were quite narrow in trying to achieve those goals and targets and enabling governments to be able to focus on these issues that were seen as important by the global community. So they're quite narrow, few targets, few indicators, and so on. So what have we learned from the MDGs? The stock taking showed us a couple of things. Firstly, gender equality persisted and still continues to a large extent. Inequality and equity issues persist. From the MDGs, and even now we are grappling with that challenge. Climate change, as we know, has become one of the top concerns of the global community. War and conflict, which many parts of the world is experiencing, and which is a major threat to human development and progress on it. Poverty still remains in pockets, although tremendous progress has been made. And finally, progress has been uneven. If you look at any country, look at the data on any of the goals and targets of the MDGs and the SDGs, we will see that progress is very uneven. Some provinces, some districts doing much better than other provinces and other districts. Yeah, I'll come back to that point later. And finally, targets. The targets in the MDGs did not adequately take into account local context and issues that countries faced. These targets were set globally, and it did not cover many areas, particularly cross-cutting areas, like I talked about gender equality, equity issues, climate change, and so on. So these were some of the main lessons learned from the MDGs. The SDGs try to build on this to see how we can address some of these, what I would call the structural challenges that we face as society, which are the root causes of many of the problems that families and communities face. This is striking. We have a list also from the UN studies to show the number of issues that were not addressed in the MDGs. And look at this list. It cuts across human rights, inequality, peace and security, biodiversity, NCDs, etc. So quite a range of issues that were not within the scope of the MDGs. And now when you look at the SDGs, many of these areas have been addressed in the 17 goals and targets of the MDGs. So that's what we have before us now. A much more comprehensive agenda, which still carries over the unfinished business of poverty, health, education, gender equality, but brings in some new elements, strengthens the work on climate action, addresses some of the new and emerging areas like life below water, sustainable cities, innovation, etc. Yeah, so in that sense, a much more comprehensive and holistic agenda that we have before us. So the SDGs therefore have targets that are universal, are closely interrelated. The goals are very ambitious, they're aspirational, so countries have to really assess to what extent those high standards set in each of the goals and targets can actually be achieved. And if they can't be achieved in the short term, how countries like in ASEAN can develop a roadmap to achieve those standards in the coming 5 or 10 years. What's also striking about the SDGs is that you have a lot of focus on the means of implementation, because the critique of the MDGs was it addressed what to do, but less on how to do it. So therefore, the SDGs started focusing more, and you have therefore 90 rhyme outcomes and 70 related to means of implementation, which means how to address the goals and targets, etc. Which then gives us the gamut of 300 plus indicators. And finally, the importance in the SDGs of investing in national capacity and data. And I'll keep coming back to that point on data. Third, the SDGs just didn't come out all of a sudden. There's a whole build-up. I talked about the stock taking of the MDGs, but there's also a series of international conferences and meetings that fed into the SDGs, all during that period of 2014, 15, leading up to 16. And here you have the main ones. Disaster risk reduction in Sendai, 2015. World Humanitarian Summit, Istanbul, 2016. Financing for Development, Addis Ababa, 2015. And now, just this month, the 4th financing conference held in Spain, just a few weeks back, and you're looking at the results coming out from there, and climate change COP21 in Paris. All these summits were the precursor to the MDGs. So whatever nations agreed in these big summits went straight into the SDGs. It didn't have to be rediscussed again. And that's important, because that build-up from these conferences was critical in crafting the goals and targets of the SDGs. Now, when we look at indicators, I always emphasize the importance of looking at indicators, because that's what gives us the actual picture on the ground. And the SDGs, in that sense, is comprehensive in that it is able to cover the various dimensions, like the 5 Ps, for example, we mentioned, are all covered in the indicators. So you have, for example, 24 indicators which talks about the how. 74 people, 58 indicators prosperity, economic growth, 52 on planet and climate change, and 21 on peace, justice, and institutions. And that's quite revealing. This is why data is very important, because that's the evidence, and that's what shows us what's happening on the ground. Otherwise, it is just an opinion. And data, therefore, is critical for achievement of SDGs, as well as for monitoring and reporting. I will focus now on the principle of no one left behind, which is one of the most challenging areas for ASEAN countries, and I think something that needs to be done to address this particular principle. And why is it important? Because we have 3 principles of the SDGs: universality, the goals and targets are universal standards; integration, socioeconomic and environmental; and then you have the important principle of no one left behind. This focuses on issues of equity, inequality and inclusion. And that's why, in my view, it's something that's very, very important. However, there are many challenges. Most countries, including ASEAN, are still quite unclear or remain vague on who these people who are left behind. What data do we have on them? Are they counted? Are they included in our national policies and regional policies and programs and interventions? And there's always a challenge of how we implement programs that target those left behind. Particularly for our countries, compared to the developed countries. For developing countries and ASEAN, this is an area where not much mention is made of non-citizens, migrants, undocumented states, who are some of the ones who are the most vulnerable, most left behind, but who are not included often in national policies and interventions. And particularly minorities, indigenous groups, racial, ethnic, etc., and undocumented states are the people, in my view, who are the most vulnerable, who need special attention. The efforts that have been taken by ASEAN will focus primarily on social protection, which has rightly targeted some of the vulnerable groups, children, elderly, and disabled. But that's not enough. We need to do more to push the bar on how we focus on those left behind. And the main challenge is, again, the lack of disaggregated data. We do not have data on many of these communities, families, and households that have been left behind. And given the complexity and the diversity of countries in ASEAN region, Asia, which is a big challenge as to how we're able to address the needs of these vulnerable groups. In the voluntary national reports review done by the UN, came up with some conclusions. Firstly, weak attention in 47 reports that were reviewed in 2020 to address inequality and the commitment to no one left behind in most countries. States are not reporting about integrating the SDGs in local plans. And SDGs related to environment, inequality, and governance, those goals and targets, receive the lowest priority with only 0.2% or less of budget allocations. So you see the discrepancy in terms of where the priorities are in plans and where the investment is being made. And some of these structural issues, which I come back to, on environment inequality, governance, and institutions, are least priority in many countries. And many have not calculated the cost of implementation. How much does this actually cost us in aggregate in a country? Second, I'll focus on planning and budget, because this is fundamental that we have this right in order to be able to deliver on the goals and targets. Aligning planning and budgeting means institutional arrangements that enable coherence vertically and horizontally across the planning process, that are led by ministries of planning or departments of planning in the country. Yeah. It means mapping the SDG goals and target and integrating them within the national and subnational priorities and programs. Second, the institutional mechanisms should be able to deliver on implementation of the SDGs and to balance sectoral and cross-sectoral actions at the national and local levels. So therefore, this integrated approach to planning is extremely important, which will help us then address the cross-sectoral and the multidisciplinary nature of the SDG goals and targets. Budgeting. Now, like Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and other countries in ASEAN, many have moved into what is now called outcome-based budgeting. And that is really a step forward. Many countries are still far behind, but using an outcome-based budgeting or results-based budgeting enables countries to be able to better incorporate the goals and targets of the SDGs and to be able to deliver on results, focus on results, moving from line budgeting to outcome and results-based budgeting, OPB. And that's I think, another critical architecture besides planning that countries in ASEAN need to look at moving forward. Because in our work in PFM, for example, in UNICEF, we say our motto should be all countries in ASEAN should generate revenue from taxes, subsidies, etc., realign expenditures, avoid expenditures, redundancies, wastage, etc., eliminate those, and better deliver results. So what are the key trends in ASEAN now? What we're seeing is that we need to cost our development plans. While finance is growing in ASEAN with domestic revenue, international financial flows, particularly for China, in ASEAN, etc., we need to be able to cost our development plans and how much it's going to cost us to deliver on the SDGs. However, we notice data shows that private finance, domestic private finance, is also uneven. 35% in Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, but only 22% in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam. So that is uneven. So countries are now moving to what is called diversified financing, blended finance, impact investing, private partnerships, bonds, etc. These are new financial mechanisms that are being put in place by countries to be able to overcome the constraints of shrinking domestic private finance. And domestic revenues are also quite low in ASEAN when compared to high-income countries. Singapore, compared to Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Myanmar, Philippines, Thailand, etc., is only $600 per person, when high-income countries in Europe and other parts of Asia is more than $15,000 per person. Some countries like Cambodia depend more than 70% on public investment from international sources, nearly 80-90% of that from China. So very dependent on external funding. And finally, as the Addis Ababa agenda showed, countries have not yet developed a comprehensive financial strategy, what is called the integrated national financial frameworks for ASEAN. All these, in my view, related to planning and budgeting, needs priority in the ASEAN countries. This is what the Addis Ababa conference agreed to develop integrated financing, comprehensive framework for public-private finance, appropriate public policies and regulatory frameworks to align the various development financing with the SDGs, and to promote platforms for cross-government coordination dialogue on policy and institutional reform. Finally, let me come to my last part, key challenges. So what do we face in ASEAN when we look at the next 6 years moving forward? Where are we? When you take the larger region of Asia Pacific, by 2022, we had very good progress in some areas, Goal 7, Goal 9, for example. However, in the same year, the least progress was in Goal 6, 8, 12, 14, and 17. So overall, and I'll come back to COVID in the end, notwithstanding COVID, overall the progress has been still slow. At midpoint, we reached less than 50% of progress. Yet overall progress, we should have reached by midpoint 50%, but we had only 14.4% progress in Asia Pacific. These are statistics from the UN SDG. Interestingly enough, goal number 13, climate, has been the worst among the goals in terms of progress. Partly because some of the countries in the region are perpetrators of climate change, while many, many others are victims of climate change and natural disasters. So overall, UN assessment is that Asia Pacific countries will miss 90% of the 118 SDG targets by 2030, unless serious efforts are made to rapidly accelerate in the next 6 years. That is the final message. Yeah. And we need to work on data. We still have a lack of data for over 51 of the 169 SDG targets. Now, having said that, yes, COVID-19 was definitely a big blow for all countries in this region, globally as well, to regress all the progress that has been made. Funds had to be diverted to COVID, and so on, and that was the reality that we had to face. But we have to look at what could be done in the remaining 6 years. Here's a snapshot. You can look at it in terms of each of the SDGs, how countries have progressed in ASEAN, but also some of the challenges. Some areas like malnutrition, primary education, renewable energy, etc., we've done much, much better. But there are still challenges that we face in many of the SDG goals and targets. I'm picking up 3 indicators to show the challenges we face across ASEAN countries. And I come back to the point that it's been uneven. SDG progress has been uneven across the 10 ASEAN countries. Look at this data on social sector spending. Education has been rather good, however very low in Laos and Cambodia. Health has also increased in many countries, and social protection, and that primarily because of COVID-19 in the last few years. However, if you look at the general scenario, some countries like Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia are doing quite well in Indonesia. However, the least developed countries, Laos, Cambodia, still fall behind on social sector spending from World Bank, ADB data, etc. Second indicator, education spending. Similar story. Countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam doing extremely well to the recommended 20% investment of public funding in education. Interestingly enough, Brunei falls very low, Cambodia and Laos PDR again. So you have that unevenness across the 10 countries when it comes to indicators related to education. And similarly, after school percentage in each group, with Myanmar having the largest number of dropouts at upper secondary level, followed by Laos, and largest than Indonesia as well. So this is another area that needs attention. Those 3 indicators give us a sort of snapshot of how uneven progress has been going on in the 10 countries of ASEAN. So the voluntary national review reports, the most recent one in 2020, also highlighted how countries have reported on SDG progress across the strategies, the policies, and the budgets that they've allocated. The good news is that most countries have developed a large number of policies. Most countries have addressed poverty, economic growth, education, gender equality, but less on water, energy, etc. In some SDGs, not enough data is available. Countries are generally underreporting on policies, and we have the challenge of some new policies that are being developed, but unclear as to which are the policies that are developed or formulated in countries specifically for the SDGs. Some of them are carried over policies from previous periods. So, to conclude, what are the opportunities we have? Firstly, like I said, go back to the point earlier, we have to really localize the SDGs at the subnational level. We have to harmonize our indicators with our universal standard with country-specific standards and how we balance those two. We have to see the SDGs as a general standard that we have to incorporate into our national policies. I again underline the importance of disaggregated data in terms of income, age, ethnicity, etc., because that gives us the real picture as to those who are left behind and where to target our policies and projects. We have to strengthen our multi-modal partnerships and particularly work as we've done in recent years much more with the private sector. And finally, when it comes to data, we have to draw on a variety of sources, not just depend on administrative data, but also on factual and perception surveys, expert assessment, UN reports, etc. That's the range of data that we need to put together to really assess progress and look at where the gaps are. So therefore, holding governments accountable to SDG implementation means better understanding of partnerships and capacity to mobilize parliament, national human rights institutions, civil society, and youth, young people, to ensure the accountability. That's the only way we can have a civil society watch on how governments are progressing on SDG implementation. We have to use human rights mechanisms that we have, the Human Rights Commission and various reporting mechanisms under the treaties to be able to address some of the gaps and challenges that we face in our countries in ASEAN. And we have mechanisms like UPR, CRC, CEDAW reports, human rights system, and mechanisms at our disposal to do that. So, to conclude, we have a comprehensive SDG. We have a challenge to integrate them much better into our national development plans. We still have big problems of data and disaggregation. We have to address capacity and the partnerships. And therefore, that's why localization becomes important. Now, most countries in ASEAN, some moving much faster than others, like the Philippines, Indonesia, in particular, going very fast on decentralization path, which is good, because that's what's going to help us to be able to invest in the capacity and the resources needed at the subnational and local levels for SDG implementation. So that decentralization process is very good, and we have to capitalize on that. However, there's no awareness on the SDGs. Yeah, apart from those of us in this room or on the Zoom call and some others working in the international organizations in the UN, very few people really know what the SDGs are. So how do you establish downward accountability? How do we enable citizens, parliamentarians, civil society, and other professional organizations to become key partners in our work on SDGs? And finally, how do we work towards enabling governments to disaggregate the data and to use that for policy formulation and for program implementation of the SDGs to achieve the goals and targets. So what does this mean for us in ASEAN? First, strengthening our political commitments across government agencies, but particularly in my view, at the local government level, councils, members of parliament, district officials, etc. Streamline and clarify the federal versus local accountabilities and responsibilities. Clearly define subnational and local priorities and indicators, specifically targeting the most marginalized and vulnerable. Therefore integrate better the SDGs in local plans. Improve financing and administration management, and build partnership at the local level. That's the way we can enable the localization of the SDGs to really happen and become a reality. So, good news and not so good news. Good news is most ASEAN countries have tremendous laws and policies. We have many we can fall back on. We've seen good progress in poverty, health, education targets of the SDGs. We've seen work starting on data, better planning and budgeting, and we've seen also some institutional reform, and especially governments trying to bring together various ministries and departments to work together. So that national readiness is improving. However, still we face challenges in terms of implementation. So while the policies are there, implementation is where we need to focus on. Political commitment, going beyond governments to work on partnerships and social mobilization. And therefore, bringing these key players together becomes the challenge. So we have some good progress here, but more needs to be done. The not so good news, in my assessment of SDG implementation in ASEAN are the following. We are still focusing too much on the economic in the SDGs, at the cost of the social and the environment targets and indicators. If you do a mapping and an assessment of goals and targets, investment, implementation, progress, and challenges, you will clearly see that the economic indicators, the goals and targets are doing much better than the social and the environment. Yeah. because in some ways, the SDGs were a compromise between economic growth and environmental protection. Second, critical institutions have not been reformed. We still need to do a lot of work on institutional reform and capacities within institutions at the national level, sub-national, local level. We have to address root causes. SDGs gives us the framework to do that. Yeah. To address inequality, to address issues of no one left behind, to address poverty, etc. How can we optimize the scope of the goals and targets to address those structural constraints, as I called it, of inequality? And more, we are facing the challenges of austerity and national security, which has taken priority over global development. So countries tend to focus more on national security issues than they do on global social development and the SDGs. And finally, the SDGs is still a long way to go to contribute to improving the architecture of global governance, human rights and accountability. That is a weak point. We have a specific goal and target on that in the SDGs, goal number 16. I hope that in the next, what follows the SDGs, we're able to strengthen that particular goal to look at how the architecture of global governance, human rights and accountability can be better streamlined and made more effective. Thank you very much. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Victor. You've done extremely well, right on the dot. You finished your turf 20 as promised. I do not want to do any quick summary. Firstly, once again, I would like to congratulate you. Started from the very beginning, evolution as SDGs. Many points you highlighted, the good news and not so good news. That's another phrase for bad news. I'm wondering why you can use the word bad news. We have good news and not so bad news, not so good news. Anyway, I think you have said it all. Yeah? We're past the halfway mark. This is 2024. We have just over 5 years to go. Overall performance of 14%. Yeah? The global average is probably about 17 or so we are underperforming in ASEAN. Disparities among ASEAN countries. Some countries are doing better than others, obviously. Some problems you highlighted, issues on undocumented migrant workers, for example, budget, integration of SDGs into the planning process, which in some countries quite well done, in some others, they are behind. Anyway, the whole purpose is to understand what each one of us is doing in various ASEAN countries, to share best practices with a view of learning from each other. The other will be awareness. You said you were correct on this. There's a need for us to do a lot more in enhancing awareness on what SDGs are. And as we listen to you, we have learned a lot. Thank you once again, Dr. Victor, for that very comprehensive presentation. Next, we have Jeremy Lim. He's from the Asia headquarters of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. He's been working on the dashboard for Malaysia in particular, but he's making some comparisons. Yours was very macro, very important as a backdrop to this morning's discussion. Jeremy will probably go into detail on some aspects of the SDGs. Over to you, Jeremy.
I hope the audience on Zoom can hear me. I have my slides up. Is it better?
You can use both.
I can use both. Okay, I hope it's clear.
Okay, can everyone hear?
I think you can just, I can just be seen through the audience view. Oh, cannot be.
Check the.
You go.
Not online, not online.
Check the news.
Problem? You can go to mic.
No, it's okay. Otherwise, I'll just use.
No, you need.
Go this.
You need for
Go
online.
this.
Sorry?
You need for that for
This
online.
I need to hold this for online. I need this.
Okay.
So I think this is for online, and this is for the room.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks everyone. Okay. Thanks very much to organizers for the opportunity to just present this simple analysis on Malaysia's performance. So just to mention again, I'm from the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Asia office, based here in Sunway University in Kuala Lumpur. So what I will be representing is SDSN's position on SDG performance. So just to quickly go through that, we publish reports every year on individual country performances, and the way they are measured is using this traffic light system that the team in Paris has developed over the years. So, so that you understand what you will be seeing in a couple minutes, I'll just explain a bit what this traffic light system means. So in general, the team over in Paris sets thresholds for granting you, a pass or fail based on these colors. So for instance, for the indicator of unemployment, if you score anything less than 5%, you're getting a red. More than 10%, you're getting a green. Everything in between, that will be mathematically calibrated to show where you stand globally. And here we also developed a system to just denote whether you are on track or very far off course to achieving the goals by 2030. Okay, so this is where Malaysia stands. It's a sea of red and orange and yellow. The specifics of how it looks so bad is because the SDSN has taken the position that the way we assign the color is based on your two worst performing indicators. So for instance, if SDG 5 has 4 indicators, your worst 2 performing are red, you may have 2 greens, it will come back to a rating of red. This is to ensure that the rating reflects a leave no one behind kind of strategy, so that it focuses on implementation. So rich countries cannot get away with only implementing some aspects of an SDG and getting a good score because they do well in things they have an advantage in. So you can see overall Malaysia does not score well based on our methodology. And this is just a quick chart of where Malaysia's performance has been over time. So you can see in the later years there's a spike up, but in general it's been a downward trajectory based on the 2024 methodology. That's a comprehensive assessment based on hundreds of indicators. And this is where I'll go into a bit of comparison. So we are being outperformed, even though you might have seen we started at a decently okay place. In terms of the ranking, we are being outperformed everybody else. In particular, note here is Indonesia, because Indonesia did not start off at a lower base compared to countries like Myanmar, Cambodia, and even to some extent the Philippines. So I'm going to zoom into Indonesia as a particular point of comparison. The overall picture is that most countries are improving in terms of the SDG scores. This could be boosted by something the previous speaker mentioned, economics, just general well-being improvements. But as reflected in the rankings, it's largely stagnated. We don't see any major leaps. The only real exception to that is the Philippines, again lower base, but Indonesia in particular, if you look at the red line and where it crosses, that's Indonesia. It's completely caught up to us and overtaken us for quite a few years now. And this is just a zoomed in picture of that. And you can check out the reports for yourself, but generally each SDG is assigned a score from 0 to 100. If you think of it as a test score, whether you pass or fail, Malaysia, in quite a few regards, have failed and has been a relatively bad student in terms of improving itself. You can see improvements elsewhere, but there are some that just remain quite low. So life on land, gender equality. I want to zoom in on SDG 2 later, and despite our advances on SDG 7, we are leaving quite a few low-hanging fruit on the table. So this is just to illustrate the points about having this data, being able to look at it for your implementation strategy. Indonesia, again, has done better on the scores that they have been lower at. So in general, their scores that are generally below 60, they have made improvements, and Malaysia has made less improvements over time. So this is just a very quick example. So Indonesia has been able to catch up and has been able to improve up to 14 ranks, whereas Malaysia has slipped 7 ranks on SDG 7 specifically because of their investment in renewable energy. So if you look at the bottom left of the chart, Malaysia has improved its renewable energy consumption by 4%. Indonesia has gone up by 12. Compare the improvement, it's a threefold difference. Of course, Indonesia is a far bigger country, but that only emphasizes the point that Malaysia, despite having better access to capital markets, despite being a country that has great access to electricity, has failed in this regard to catch up to a local, a neighbor within the region, despite our advantages. So this is just a quick chart about how much renewable energy has hit the Indonesian market compared to Malaysia. You can look at some of this data from the World Bank on that. And a lot of the improvements have been solar. Solar in Malaysia, widely talked about. There are plenty of nice policies that are out, but the catch-up has not materialized. We are falling behind our neighbors, especially given that other Indo-Chinese players like Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia are moving more and more in this direction. We are leaving a very important enabler for other aspects of sustainable development on the table. So I'll quickly finish up. Malaysia's SDG 2 performance is being dragged down by our inability to address wasting and stunting. So if you look at the second and third row, in general, Indonesia has made improvements, Malaysia has declined. And this is largely due to the inability to address our nutrition education throughout the country. So this is just to again re-emphasize that point. Indonesia, on the other hand, has had a presidential decree which has wide-ranging implications throughout the government's implementation of this kind of nutrition education. So they've been able to tout these stats you see, where generally they're trying to make sure that kids get nutritious meals so that they can make improvements in these rankings before the kids hit the age of 5, where this stunting and wasting issue is almost irreversible. So I'll speed through this because I think I'm running out of time. You can check this out. I hope maybe the organizers can distribute this. But at SDG-SSE, we have developed some tools for state and district level governments to monitor their progress based on publicly available data from the Department of Statistics. So we visualize it. This dashboard very much mirrors our international counterparts. And we are able to give them a traffic light rating based on international standards for each SDG. At the district level, we also go into this kind of deep details. So you can go district by district to make a comparison with a color scale map to make your relative assessment of where your district stands relative to other districts. So thanks very much for the time.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that presentation. As I said, Jeremy's was mainly micro in terms of the approach, zooming on various ASEAN country performance, in particular comparing Malaysia and Indonesia, SDG 2 in particular. The other is developed, as we heard from Dr. Victor, we have differences in SDG performance among ASEAN countries. Similarly, in Malaysia, among states. We have 13 plus 1, 33, 14 altogether. There are differences in the SDG performance in Malaysia, within Malaysia. So in ASEAN, we have a varying performance among ASEAN countries. In Malaysia, we have varying degrees of success in terms of meeting goals among the states in Malaysia. So thank you. We've had two presentations. One very comprehensive presentation from Dr. Victor, very macro and focusing challenges. We passed the halfway mark. Very alarming conclusions, a lot more that we need to do. Yeah? And Jeremy has summarized some differences in performance, in particular between Malaysia and Indonesia on SDG 2. Okay, we are ready for a Q&A. As I said, we have about 160 online and about 30 in this room, 190 altogether. Quite a big crowd. Yeah? Ready for question time. Yeah? Let me open this session for Q&A. Yeah? You identify yourself, and I'm not too sure how we go about who's managing this. Yeah? Okay, first question, please. Can you raise your hand and we go straight away?
Yes, question.
Okay, can you go ahead?
We have a presentation on the chat. Because you can read out.
Can you do that? Chat box.
The first question is, what happens when SDG targets are mixed up with ESG compliance?
Okay, that's coming from Dr. Subramanian. Okay, question is, once again, what happens when SDG targets, with targets and indicators, are mixed up with ESG compliance? Thank you. Dr. Victor, you might want to venture a reply to that.
This is a challenge many countries face. I think the approach that is being taken among most countries, including ASEAN, is that here you have a list of suggested indicators for the SDGs. Yeah. On the one side. On the other side, countries, even before the SDGs and MDGs, had already started developing indicators for their national development policies. Yeah. So the first step that most countries in ASEAN took was to see how these two things can come together. Which are the indicators that give a better picture on what the situation on the ground is? Which are the indicators that are more in line with our national priorities, our development plans in the country, where we want to go in the next 5 years? Which are the indicators which are doomed, where we can have some clear achievements, progress, etc. Yeah? Using those criteria, every country did a stock taking immediately, and I know I was in UNICEF at that time, also helping with Malaysia, where I was based, helping countries in ASEAN and the region to take stock of the indicators, and that review of indicators was the first step in nearly all the countries. Now, in doing so, countries had to pick and choose. Some countries went for choosing the indicators that were suggested with the SDG goals and targets, whereas others took the national indicators as priority, as something that they would like to focus on, and hopefully progressively try to address the indicators as suggested by the UN and suggested by the SDGs and so on. So in doing so, when it comes to SDG indicators and ESG compliance, this is, I think, an area that we need to understand better and to do more work. Firstly, we have to look at what reporting is done on the indicators that are being used for measuring progress and how governments are reporting on the progress on each of those indicators. Some countries tend to focus very narrowly on progress in relation to a particular target or indicators. Other countries take a much more broader view and look at other, like climate change, for example, environmental issues. They take a much broader view of the goal and target and try to include information that goes beyond even some of the specific indicators. So that is something that I think more work needs to be done in terms of especially being compliant to ESG regulations and needs that the country faces.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Victor. Next, please.
I'm Nalini from Sri Lanka. I'm a human rights activist and trainer on SDG. Thank you so much for comprehensive, detailed presentation. So I'm really grateful for this, organizing this webinar. And my takeaway is, like you correctly said, we are spending more money on national security, for defense budget. Our South Asian countries, I'm from South Asia, which is we can transfer to the social security and to achieving sustainable development goal. So we need to raise voice within our country to reduce the defense budget. It can be translated for social security. Certain things about decentralization within the structure, within the governance. Same time, I just want to say here, like Goal 5 is for gender equality. We need to, in our patriarchal structure, from home to parliament, we need to decentralize our power with women to bring women to the decision-making table and policy-making table. So, in your presentation also, you just missed to talk about Goal 5, which is very important goal, and those targets. When you give the statistics about the dropouts, we could see dropouts in some countries like Myanmar and other countries are more. I believe and I know more of them are girl child from each country. So we need to shed light on Goal 5. Next time when you are doing presentation, we would like to hear, so what is the progress and how we are doing it. This is very important for us to talk about Goal 5. I believe personally it's a cross-cutting goal of all 17 goals and all the targets. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The first one was an observation on defense spending, which some of us are quite familiar how much money some of us are spending in defense. The other one was, so the first one was an observation. The other one was a mixed bag of decentralization and women and others. Dr. Victor, you want to say something about that, or anyone else? Dr. Eri, perhaps? Yeah, Dr. Victor? On decentralization. Decentralization.
Ask your points, definitely decentralization. Now, it'll be interesting to look at how countries define decentralization and what aspects of decentralization they're really implementing. To me, there are three key things in decentralization. The first is definitely delegation of power to subnational level, district level. Delegation of power means that decisions can be made within the subnational administrative structures, local governors, mayors, parliamentarians, members of the assembly, etc. So delegation of power. Second, also institutional delegation. For example, the Ministry of Education sitting in the federal government, in the capital level, needs to ensure that the Department of Education, the critical province and so on, also have the power and authority to be able to make some decisions. Okay. So how to balance the top down versus the bottom? That's the second aspect that is extremely important. Third is planning and budgeting, like I mentioned. Yeah. Because you can have administrative decentralization, but when it comes to planning and budgeting, most countries is highly centralized. Because they want to control the resources and control the plan for development. Yeah? So, this is a challenge. How can we ensure effective decentralization by having an approach that is able to balance the national priorities vis-a-vis the local subnational priorities, whether it's education or whether it's health or social protection or any of the areas of work. And finally, the fourth, local ownership, like I mentioned. Unless people, communities, civil society, and others in the provinces, in the districts, really take upon themselves that, that role of being gatekeepers, of being ones who can hold governments accountable, raising questions, proposing alternative plans and interventions and ways of working for government, etc. Until that ownership is there among local communities, decentralization becomes only an administrative exercise. So the four elements of decentralization, to me, are important, and it'd be good to look at each country and see which are the areas where more focus and attention is being paid. And Nalini, I fully agree. I didn't have time to go to goal 5. You talked about the gender issue as a cross-cutting area, yes, and my area of specialization there was adolescent girls. I didn't have time to go into that data as well, but we looked at the data on adolescent girls and so on. It's also quite challenging in most of our countries, both in South Asia as well as Southeast Asia. So I do agree that is an area that also needs particular attention, as I would also include that, Nalini, as a structural constraint. Yeah.
Thank you.
Gender is a structural issue.
Yeah. The trend is for more and more decentralization. In theory, some goals can be achieved better by decentralizing power. Decentralization is about giving away powers, it's about money, about authority, about delivery. This is being done to some extent in Malaysia through the all-party parliamentary group on SDGs, where we go to the ground and they complementary to government's efforts, they're bringing SDGs to the lowest level. So in theory, would you agree, Dr. Victor, that decentralization is the way forward in terms of achieving, in terms of accelerating achievement of SDGs? Do you agree with that?
Definitely, definitely. I would give top priority to decentralization. That would what will ensure local ownership at the end of the day and better results on the ground.
Thank you. Next question, please. We have a few from those attending this in person. Yes, can we have all the three in a row? We have 10 minutes ago. Yeah. Three together.
Okay. Assalamualaikum. My name is Bibi Zaliha. I'm actually representing two organizations, Malaysian Council and Committee for ASEAN Youth Cooperation. Out of all the data being shared by Dr. Victor and the panel here from two representatives on Malaysia performance on SDG. What I could see here is, for instance, like Malaysian Council, we have thousands of activities, programs being conducted towards like not just international level but up to grassroots level. But it is the best if this is actually kind of an opportunity, it's like a suggestion for me. We can see actually the increasement if we have an open platform. We can create so everybody can actually share what they do, or maybe like maybe you can put it as a table. They just click in their name of the program, which SDG, and overall it's going to be, you can see the increasement, because like us in MDM, yes, whatever that we do is actually most of it, like 70 to 80% is aligned, is supporting like at least two SDGs at the same time, the groups. But of course, at MDM, we are sharing our data with ADPGN, but not other youth organizations.
Can you be brief on your question, please?
So slightly like, I think the best is creating platform. So creating platform. So everybody could share what they do. So automatically you can see the changes of numbers, especially on the outcomes. And actually we can achieve that because we don't have that currently. So I guess we are lacking of that such platform as Dr. Victor just now. Like we need to have like a center, and it must be open.
Okay,
for everyone
about
that
by
is
sharing,
successful.
sharing of the benchmarking. Siti, next please.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Ara. So I'm from APPGM SDG Community Farming Unit. So again, thank you for the insightful presentation, sharing valuable information on the opportunities and challenges related to the SDGs, and also the analysis of the current situation in Malaysia, particularly defined in SDG 2, which I feel this is a very crucial topic, okay, and for understanding the broader application and identifying effective solutions. Okay, so my question is, what strategies have proven effective in reversing decline in similar context of SDG 2 in another country, and how might they be adapted in Malaysia? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
My question is actually very simple. Thank you so much for the presentations, and also I learned a lot out of it. I just have a question for the SDG dashboard. May I know where is it that you want to go from here after you develop the dashboard? And also I think that Dr. has also mentioned something about the importance of data. So may I know where is it that you got the data from, and is there a possibility that you want to expand the collections of the data so that you can have a more diverse kind of understanding of the situation in all these countries, or if not all the countries, maybe in Malaysia, because I believe that the complexity of the Malaysian society requires a lot more than just one source of data. Thank you.
okay, 3 questions. One about data, about the nation dashboard, which is for Jeremy, I believe. Number 2 is about health indicators, SDG 2. How can we improve our position? That's also Malaysia-centric in terms of data. Question number 1 from Siti is about creating a platform so that you can benchmark and share where you are, and in the process, of course, motivate you into achieving, doing more in terms of SDG achievement. So, okay, Jeremy, dashboard, data, and perhaps on the health SDG 2, and Victor on the sharing platform. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks very much for the questions. I will not answer those in sequence because I think it makes sense to address the last question first. In terms of the data, I think it is somewhat related. So, of course, the data currently on the dashboard is all prognosis because whether you have some skepticism about their data, they can be relied upon to at least use the same methodology across their data collection. If you have an open data collection platform, you may not have the means of verifying that data. Whether the issue of matching data collected in Malaysia to, let's say, a report produced somewhere else is that because you may measure it a little differently, and then the comparability completely breaks down. So SDSN maintained the position that the only data that we will use for our reports is data from UN databases, because they do the verification that's very, very resource intensive for all the checks. So that you measure malaria incidence in the same manner, you measure child stunting in the same manner. So at the moment, we are exploring ways to expand the data that we will display on this dashboard. Because we also understand that it is fairly limited to use the data available from 1000. So that's my answer to your question. I'm interested to have a deeper conversation.
Just add one thing in 3 seconds. APPGM have qualitative data that can complement. I don't believe that data can be right or wrong, but then we can actually complement each other. There's no such a thing as a study that can give a comprehensive and holistic kind of understanding of the data. So
Thank you. For I guess the audience that may not have heard that, APPGM SDG has quantitative data. Quantitative data. Okay, so capturing qualitative data would be a slightly more nuanced discussion. of course worth including because the dashboard currently just has the numbers on it. On the issue of
SDG2.
maybe on SDG2 first, the open platform to supply data. So currently, even public universities, many public universities have all their papers mapped to SDGs. And there's a potential opportunity that I guess APPGM SDG can also explore along with SDSN would be to work with universities to see where their studies are done so that you don't replicate the data. If, for instance, in UKM, they went to a particular village in Perak to study the incidence of malaria, then there wouldn't need to be replication if that could be published publicly rather than hidden away in a paper, not mapped, and not easy to be found. So stuff like that is something that we're in the midst of exploring. Now that people have looked at our dashboard and have asked the question, how else can this be useful to us? On the success stories at the national level are not easy to be found in the CSO circles because only governments have the power to track progress. And so the reason I use the Indonesian example on addressing stunting is because they are the ones who have the power to then disseminate resources from the center. We have not found national level change implemented by local players. That has not, throughout the years of SDSN's operation, that has been very rare. Of course, you can spend $1 million in a particular village in Nigeria to improve incomes, but that's one village. So stuff like that, the success stories, I'm afraid to say, if it's not implemented by government, through all of government kind of approach, is very difficult to see. So that's my address for SDG2. I think we can...
Thank you. We are coming to an end almost, another 5 minutes. One question online. Okay.
Dr. Ben.
Dr. Ben, okay. Yes, Dr. Ben.
I would just like to ask the question, the issue of decentralization and localization. When considering the organization of society, three major sectors: the government, the private sector, or for-profit sector, and the voluntary civil society. When we talk about decentralization, mostly pertains to the government. So even if you localize to the local government, still it is centralized within the government. One aspect of concept decentralization is when there is partnership between government, for example, and the civil society, and the government outsources some of its program services to the civil society or voluntary sector. Similarly, in the private sector, there is decentralization, localization. If, for example, a private company outsources some of its part of the supply chain by partnering with local community-based enterprises. Now, I'd like to ask the opinion of Dr. Carona. How does he look at decentralization, localization in terms of gathering information data, the private sector, and how that is implemented, for example, in Malaysia through the APPGM, the decentralization, localization, by having partnership between the government and civil society, and the government outsourcing programs and services to the local communities, not through the government, but through the civil society or community-based organizations.
Thank you, Dr. Ben. Who's going to respond to that? Oh.
Yeah, I think thanks, Benjamin, for that question. Like I said, I go back to the point that we really have to unpack what we mean by decentralization in the national as well as in the local context. Yeah. With the SDGs, what I've seen in my work and experience in the region is that, among other things, governments do realize the importance of partnering not just with the private sector, but also with civil society organizations, community groups, and professional organizations at the local level. We've seen more and more of that. Yeah. From the reporting on the SDGs from countries within the UN and outside, we've seen more involvement, participation, and delegation of some of that implementation, including resources to civil society organizations. But I think we're still in the early stages of that. More needs to be done, definitely, because the problems are so diverse, problems are so complex, and there are some at a subnational level, some regions, some provinces have better civil society, more engaged, active civil society. In others, they are hardly existent. Yeah. So where there's strong civil society, as you know, in the Philippines, a good example, where many provincial levels, civil society is very, very active and strong on the local issues of the communities, whether it is the Cordillera in the north, in Baguio, or in Mindanao among the Muslim communities and so on. Governments have to work with them, and they are working, as we know. Yeah. So that's good, and I do encourage that type of delegation for civil society, and not only civil society, also academics, professional organizations, universities, and so on. That brings me to data. We have to do much more work in this, how we can mobilize these sectors, civil society, academics, and experts, professional organizations at a subnational level, in terms of data collection, data analysis, and bringing that data into the policy dialogue with governments on SDGs. That push from the bottom when it comes to data is still not happening, in my view, as much as I would like to see. Yeah. It's important. We're still relying too much on aggregated data at the national level. We are not making efforts at a subnational level to generate the data, to show the government. We challenge your data by what we have done. And we have the evidence to prove it. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's the type of dialogue we need to have with governments and so on. So, I leave it at that.
Thank you, Dr. Victor. Indeed, you have emphasized data a lot in your presentation. The importance of data. In some cases, data is not existent. Quality of data also is questionable at times. So data indeed is a very important subject. We've got to continue improving our data sources. And on the other issue of partnership and outsourcing, is happening in many countries. Here, for example, in Malaysia, Dr. Ganison will agree that the all-party voluntary group on the SDGs have done a lot of partnership. Yeah, it's got to do with trust and track record. Yeah? I mean, you're doing well, and they're confident in you. Of course, the government will be in a better position to engage you. But that's the trend. I think in general we all agree. Those of us who are doing work on SDGs will agree that the more you delegate, the more you outsource, the better the outcomes will be. Of course, depending on the institution. Yeah, some institutions are doing a good job, some others are probably not doing as well. But the way forward is to localize, the way forward is to delegate, the way forward to just get things to come from the bottom, yeah, instead of everything coming from the center. We have, Zon, how many more minutes we got? We have 5 more minutes to go.
Yeah.
Somebody?
Dr. Ari, maybe
Oh,
3 to 5 minutes to go.
Okay, thank you. It is almost in the last minute. We have like a warm discussions coming, yeah. So I would like what I want to point of view from the SSE, whereas this is the grassroots activities, yeah. With all those, actually in overall the progress of the SDGs is quite low if we are comparing with if we are reading the report global as well the ASEAN. So I would like to say, though with all those, we have to keep in mind with our who are the left one behind. Put our mind in that positions. This is the question as well from Dr. Karunan in the presentations, Dr. Victor in the presentations. So if we see the performance of the ASEAN, I have just took only the 2 goals. At the first on the poverty, it has been increased to 27%. As well on the unemployment, it has as well increased. Yeah, so that means. What I want to say, what is actually lacking? What is actually missing with this accelerating SDGs though we have progressing, but the core problem is still there. So because I'm from the grassroots activities, I have seen in many countries that the problems of land grabbing is still there. The problems of unemployment is bigger and bigger, though with the betterment in the macroeconomic level. So I would like to bring the discussions today, starting with the brainstorming among us. What is actually the missing action, the missing strategy to accelerate this, to enable that our beneficiaries, those left, the one left behind, can be really have a betterment of life with these SDGs. So I think, therefore, from the SSE point of view, we have to transform the mindset. As Dr. Victor said, that the most government, the SDGs practitioners, doing the economic with the economic point of view, not with the equality point of view. This is what the SSE would like to bring the solutions with another angle of economic, where economic starting from the community economic, or we can say in this term the inclusive communities. Yes, we want to propose to the ASEAN that not business as usual in accelerating SDGs, but as well transforming into more inequality in bringing the benefit of development. This is my insight, my trigger discussions for today and for the next 5 webinar. Thank you, Dr. Mustafa.
Thank you, Rotary. We have 5 minutes. I give a few minutes, 1 minute to Jeremy and 2 minutes to Dr. Victor. You say your last piece, summary, Jeremy. Do you have anything to add? Yeah.
Not too much to add. Not too much to add except that the data connection. I mean, I do hope that data collected at the local level, like Dr. Victor mentioned, can make that strong a statement. I apologize to end on a note of skepticism, but I think data collection is resource intensive. Verification work is important if we are to make that case to governments for change. So I would end on a note of caution on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Dr. Victor, over to you. Some opening remarks here.
Just 2 points that came up, one question as well. That today we have tremendous databases at the global level, regional level, national level. That's not the problem. We have enough databases that we can fall back on for data, information, etc. Problem is, each of them is partial. There are gaps in the data, and that's what we need to address. Globally, you can look at UN data, UNDP, the SDG Solutions Network with Jeffrey Sachs and his institute. Regionally, you can look at ASEAN Secretariat and all the governments and the various commissions of ASEAN, which also collect data on the SDGs. And then you have the SDG Academy, think tanks, universities, and so on. So it's a tremendous amount of information there. My problem is not the databases not the sources of data and the databases. My problem is where are the gaps in our data, where we need to do more. And that's my second point. On no one left behind. Let's be clear in our countries and in our work, who are we talking about when we say left behind? Specifically who? Which groups of people, which households, which families, what's the age group, what's the gender, what's the ethnicity, etc. Second, let's count them. Count them meaning, include them in the data. Third, include them in policies, programs, and decision making. Consult them. Fourth, invest in them through various schemes, programs, community development work, projects. Let's invest in those left behind. And finally, let's build what Eddie said, that's solidarity at the grassroots level. That's my roadmap of how we can do better on the principle of no one left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Victor. One is data. As you say, there's a lot of data. We need to know what the gaps are and how to improve the quality and the availability of data. So it's not an issue, there's data everywhere, how to further improve on that. Secondly, I think you have highlighted very well the issue of no one left behind. We have gone very deep into that. I think that will be the subject of another conversation. Yeah? Let me conclude by saying two things. Firstly, this has been a very productive day for all of us. Very wonderful learning experience. We've learned a lot. And for that, I would like to thank the three co-organizers, which is APP AGM of Malaysia, SDG Academy of Malaysia, and also, of course, ISAC. Thank you. This is a tripartite joint venture. You've done a good job. Secondly, more importantly, I think, is the way forward. This is my proposal. Of course, this we're doing this as a run-up to the 2025 events when Malaysia is going to chair ASEAN, during which year we will have the summit, the SDG-SSE summit. We are working towards that. I think you all agree with me that there's a need to have, before we get there, I'm proposing that we should have one more of this. Yeah? We will take the subject, who the paper presenter should be. This is the first time, of course, to my knowledge, I've never been involved in this cross-cutting kind of comparison between ASEAN countries. Yeah? Because there are reports which you read about the performance of individual ASEAN countries, and you've gone into detail, Dr. Victor and Jeremy as well. But for me, this is the first time we have an in-depth discussion, making a comparison between the performance of various ASEAN countries. Our bad situation is very alarming, as I said. This was said by Secretary General Guterres as well. We are at a crossroads, seriously underperforming on many SDG indicators. So, in my view, there's a need to have another conversation later in the year before we have the big one next year. We will be discussing this further in Malaysia and also with our colleagues in ASEAN. Yeah? So thank you once again, Dr. Victor and Jeremy, Dr. Eri, and above all, I would like to thank those of you online who joined us, and 30 of us in this room, 150 outside there. It's been a wonderful day. It's been a productive day. I hope you enjoyed it. And we look forward to having another one later in the year. And we look forward to having a big one in the year 2025. Over to you, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Before we end, thank you very much, Dr. Sri, Mustafa, and everyone who joined us, Dr. Victor and also Jeremy. So, before we come to the year end, we actually have to build up the next series. So please allow me to do some publicity. Just 1 minute. The slide, please. Okay, we have the next series. So remember, every month, the last Wednesday of the month is the day that we gather together. Alright, the next series will talk about economy, the very important topic. And also we will dive more on the SSE model as well. So please join this community WhatsApp group to get updates. Today we have a lot of good insight and sharing. And I believe if you build up slowly and when you come in person, we will have a very fruitful and meaningful meeting. So join us, join the WhatsApp group, everyone from the online, from in person, and we will put all the updates. If you want the slides, you want to know what is the next event, you want to know how to register for this summit, please follow us in the community WhatsApp group. Thank you very much, thank you everyone, and I'll see you again. Thank you. Alright.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, Amy. Hello. From Kuala. Oh, the Josephine from Philippines. Yeah.
Yes, I have with me, we have this, Gil and our colleague, no?
Yeah, it's a great fun. Thank you. Bye. Bye. See you in the next Zoom. Yeah. Bye.
For friends in person, we have a luncheon together, welcome, and also we take a group photo before we leave the gathering. Let's take a group photos. Okay. Photographers, let's listen to. Wait for that. What we can do is we can join the all the mic so they don't.
Kedua lah, di scan my slide.
Okay, everyone, so I would like to have everyone in front of here. Please facing me. I'll be standing there. That will be facing me. Thank you. So everybody will be standing there.
If you are not rushed, we talk some. We have a lot of youth program.
Everyone, here, please.
Come on now, we take a group photos. Where is Tasri? Tasri, your things up.
One don't be shy. Everyone squeeze a bit. Come on.
We can mix, join them.
Yeah. Please just squeeze in a bit in between those two banners. That's why everybody needs to crunch in a bit.